All right, so we'll nosh a little Torah, and then we'll all run home to finish getting ready for Purim. So, Malika, I'm very glad in particular that you're here today, because the text that we're going to be looking at is going to answer a very important question, one that you have brought up before. Why Aaron? Right, Aaron and his children, his sons, have become the priests, right? The Kohanim. That's where the name Kohen comes from in the Hebrew the Hebrew last name dictionary. But we often take Aaron for granted. But who are some of the alternatives that could have also have been the priests, the officiant?
Miriam.
All right, so we could have had Miriam, right? Moses' sister,
sons.
right? We could have had Moses and family, right? I'm just going to write Moses rather than his sons as well, but Moses had sons.
Right.
Why didn't Moses continue as the priest? Moses even functions as a priest until Aaron and his sons are inaugurated, doing the sacrifices and inauguration of the tabernacle.
Did Moses' sons come with him?
They did not come with him into Egypt, but they did rejoin them at Mount Sinai. So he wasn't in Egypt. His sons weren't with him during the Exodus.
Right.
But his sons did rejoin the nation. Yes. All right. Anyone else? Well, I'm going to put in one vote here. What about Joshua?
I was just going
You know?
He was a general, not a.
Oh, he's so you can't be a military leader and also slit a few animals' throats and sprinkle some blood. I mean, what was so hard about being a priest?
I would hope that a priest would need to do more than that.
Okay, so maybe we were expecting more from the priest than just the technical skills of and sprinkle burn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other options? How about everyone?
Absolutely.
Why do we need priests? Right? Build the Mishkan, have the altar there, and then everyone can come and use it whenever they feel like it.
What, take a number and wait your turn?
Yeah, exactly. You know, first come, first serve. You know,
Democracy in action.
Democracy in action. Prior to this, you know, before we had the Mishkan especially, people could offer sacrifices whenever, wherever, however they felt like. And if it was a good sacrifice, then God went, yay. And if it was a bad sacrifice, you got, you know, the whole Cain and Abel story. So why do we even need anyone? Why couldn't we just sacrifice willy-nilly as we felt like? Assuming willy-nilly didn't object.
Well, it was more than just sacrificing. I mean, you had to be dressed in a certain way. You had to be ritually purified in a certain way. There were all of these things that surrounded the offering of the sacrifices. So to make sure that everything was done according to Hoyle, somebody had to make sure that things were being done properly.
So what you're saying is that you needed a certain set of skills,
Yeah,
and a certain set of knowledge,
right.
to make sure you were doing it correctly. And that meant that just everyone doing it would have to go through some fairly heavy training to be able to do it. Let me ask you this. Why do we need policemen? Why can't we just give everyone a badge and a gun? And if you see something that's going wrong, you can put a stop to it. And if someone else sees something wrong, they can put a stop to it. And now we have cops on every corner. And then people will never again say,
Yes.
why don't we have cops when you need one? Everyone will be a cop. No?
There are a lot of people who feel that way.
Yes.
And that's scary.
You need the skills and the knowledge of the law
That's true.
to be a law enforcement person.
You mean just because you think what they're doing is wrong, if it's not actually illegal, it doesn't mean you can stop them? Or if it is illegal, you have certain requirements of how we as a society have said it needs to be stopped? Sort of, kind of, that we do have rules even for the policemen.
Right.
And if you're going to be a cop, it takes more than a badge and a gun to be a cop.
Right.
And it takes more than a fancy set of clothes and a sharp knife to be a priest. So we have to come back. Okay, maybe not everyone could be a priest. Maybe we need people also who are taking care of the daily duties. Because remember, the priesthood wasn't just about helping with other people's sacrifices. It was about doing the community sacrifices on behalf of the community day in, day out. These are the people who were getting the wood ready. These are the people who were clearing the ashes. They were doing a lot of grunt work in addition to the fancy stuff that the rituals that other people saw. And maybe you needed people who had a dedicated career in doing that.
Did the priests also function at that time as judges
Yes,
and mediators?
they absolutely seem to have been both judges, mediators, and teachers.
But everybody, but the
Then
people
they
from
need
every
a
tribe were
code.
judges though, if you, right? I
Oh,
mean,
there were also judges within the tribal system as well. Yes.
right, and so every tribe had, if you look
Oh.
back at Moses and all
Right,
that, they picked
yeah.
people from every tribe to be judges.
Right. But were the priests also judges?
They were ultimate adjudicators. So
That's
basic
what I
issues.
thought.
Right.
So they need to have a strict code of ethics.
They did, and we hear an awful lot about it.
Yes.
So, well, why don't we go ahead and see, because we're not the first people to ask the question, why Aaron?
Can I ask one more question before
yeah.
we move on? The Levites that were not of Aaron's tribe, didn't they also have responsibilities?
Yes, the Levites as a whole tribe
Right.
had responsibilities for the ritual system, now at the heart of the people,
Right,
because they would not receive any land when they reached the land of Israel.
right.
So the Levites as a whole had many different duties and responsibilities for carrying and preparing things. And then the Kohanim, the subgroup of the Levites,
Right.
had specific responsibilities for the sacrificial services and things that happened within the Mishkan and then later temple itself.
Right, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Good. All right. Oh, actually, sorry, we got to read. Talking about this as though we've already read it, but we haven't. But we're only going to get a couple verses in before we get to our commentary. So we're on page 621. We are in Parashat Tzav. And chapter 8.
Want me to?
If you wouldn't mind, as Harriet has gone back north and attending the APAC.
Oh, is she an APAC? Oh,
Yeah, she was.
cool.
Yeah, she and David were at APAC. Yeah.
How cool is that?
The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take Aaron along with his sons and the vestments, the anointing oil, the bull of purification offering, the 2 rams, and the basket of unleavened bread, and assemble the whole community at the entrance of the tent of meeting." Moses did as the Lord commanded him. And when the community was assembled at the entrance of the tent of meeting, Moses said to the community, "This is what the Lord has commanded to be done."
All right. So what's happening here? Remember how we finished the book of Exodus with the construction, the building of the Mishkan, the actual items itself? What's happening here?
The priests are being set up.
The priests are being set up, exactly. So we've built the building, and now we are officially, formally inaugurating, consecrating, dedicating, whatever you want to use as a word, the priests. These are going to be the guys. And so you're getting all of the priests together, Aaron and his sons, 5 guys at the moment. Plus you have all of the things they're going to have to wear and the things that are needed for the sacrifices, for their inauguration. And one of the very important things, the entire community. This is not a private ceremony between Moses and his brother and nephews. This is in front of the entire community, just as the building of the Mishkan was in front of the entire community. And Moses is going to go through washing and anointing and preparing the priests, just as he did for the tabernacle itself. And Moses has to hand over the reins, so to speak, of the sacrificial system to Moses, to Aaron and his sons, or Aaron and Moses's nephews, which must have been a little difficult for Moses to say, I'm not doing this anymore, you're doing it. But Moses still has a pretty good job, so I don't think he was too upset. But it comes back again to our opening question. Why Aaron?
Aaron was the one who spoke from Moses from the very beginning.
Absolutely. Remember.
So why not Aaron?
So why not? Okay, well, why not Aaron?
Well, Aaron led the
Ah.
calf thing.
But
Okay.
he tried to restrain the people, and so that might actually be,
Okay. So
considered a good thing, that Aaron
we said it was.
did his best to restrain the people from going crazy
Right.
over the
We said it was difficult for Joshua because he was a general. That kind of disqualifies him. We said that with Moses, right? He's already got a job. Maybe it's a little hard for him to do both, right? With Miriam, well, we're going to see a little bit later on that there's some issue with her gossip. Maybe that's disqualifying her. By the way, we're going to be talking about that at the Miriam's Tea for Sisterhood in April. More about Miriam and her zealousness for love and justice. But Aaron, these are all kind of maybe disqualifiers, but Aaron is the only one who actually has made an idol to lead the people in worship. That would seem like the kind of thing you don't want your high priest to be doing. You know, he is the ultimate bulwark, the firewall against any perversion of the sacrificial system. And yet he was right there at the start of the golden calf. And absolutely that is going to come back as being part of how our tradition understands his placement. Okay, so Miriam, you still okay?
Yep.
Miriam, you still okay reading?
The selection of Aaron and his sons is an illustration of the verse, "You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness above your fellows."
All right, so this line from Psalms, you have loved righteousness and hated wickedness, and that's why God has anointed you. That verse is applied to Aaron and his sons. Now, before we can get to how it was applied to them, like how do they fill in that verse? How do they match it? We have to come to a midrashic paradigm of how this verse gets fulfilled. That is to say, let's look at the best case example of someone who lives up to this verse, and then we'll use it as a litmus test for Aaron. So the first example we have,
Rabbi Yudon, in the name of Rabbi Azariah, explained the verse as referring to Abraham, our father.
right? So, okay. You loved righteousness, you hated wickedness, you were anointed above your fellows. That applies to Abraham. We can sort of buy that. Yeah, Abraham, we can sort of go, he was kind of cool guy. Let's see how he rides that out.
When he was pleading for mercy for the Sodomites, he said, "O Master of the universe, you have sworn that you will not again bring a flood upon the world, as it is written, for this is as the waters of Noah to me. For I have sworn that the waters of Noah should no more go over the earth."
Right? So they imagine that discussion between Abraham and Moses is more than just the bargaining over how many people to find that are righteous in Sodom to prevent God from destroying it. He's like, wait a minute, God. You're going to destroy Sodom, but you promised not to destroy when you were talking to Noah, right? And I've got this quote from Isaiah, which reminds us of this promise. And then he continues in his line of argument.
Is it just a flood of water that you will not bring, but a deluge of fire you will bring? Why will you with subtlety evade the oath?
So get the audacity of the Midrash for what Abraham would be saying. It's like, oh, I see, God. You said you weren't going to destroy things with fire anymore. Or sorry, with water anymore. But fire, that's okay? Talk about a big loophole. Abraham is basically castigating God by saying, God, if you destroy with fire, you're breaking your oath to Noah. And that's not what God should be doing. That takes some chutzpah. It takes some commitment to righteousness and to goodness, to be willing
to believe in what you're saying,
and to believe
a strong belief,
and to believe in what God is.
Mhm.
To understand that God is just and righteous, and therefore something which isn't could not be something that God would do. And Abraham is asking for an explanation of how this is not a violation of that oath. And he goes on further to argue to God.
He said, if you would have justice, there could be no world. If you would have a world, there can be no justice. You would hold a rope by both its ends. You would have a world and you would have true justice. But if you will not be a little indulgent, your world will not be able to endure.
All right, so what's his critique to God about this justice in world thing?
You gotta give the kids a little slack.
You got to give a little slack. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Look, God, you want to have a world and you want to have justice. If you have perfect justice, this world is not going to stand, because every single time something wrong happens, if you're smiting,
Mhm.
the world's going to be smitten or smote, or whatever the proper past participle would be. It's gone. You can't have perfect justice and have a world. And that means you're going to have to give a little. You're going to
Measure justice with mercy.
have to measure your justice with mercy. But you're going to have to temper it down a little bit. And that is the kind of guy that Abraham is. And that's why the verse gets applied to him, as it says.
Said the Holy One, blessed be he, to Abraham. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. You have loved to plead justification for my creatures and hated to find them guilty. Therefore God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness above your fellows.
All right, so notice the playful twist that they used in this interpretation. You have loved righteousness. Okay, we're going to get that. But what's righteousness in the eyes of Abraham? Pleading for compassion, for justification, trying to explain away the problems of the other people, to say it's not really that bad. They didn't really mean it. They didn't do what you think his righteousness is not the self-righteous, sanctimonious, table pounding, you're all sinners. His righteousness is, I'm sure they didn't really mean to do what you think they did. And you shouldn't punish them so severely. That's what loving righteousness is, according to this midrash. And likewise, your hating of wickedness is a hatred to find them wicked, a hatred to use the term wicked to describe someone else, that you don't want to call someone wicked. Just think for a second about how they have flipped that on its head. For so many people, when they say love righteousness and hate wickedness, they think that means you have to be powerfully sanctimonious and condemnatory, and go around condemning people left, right, and center. Right? Righteous is the only way. That's wicked. That's wicked. That's wicked. And this interpretation is saying no. It's saying righteousness is the way to live, of course, but I don't think he was really trying to be wicked when he did that. He probably didn't understand what was good. He probably made a mistake, or maybe he was being forced to do it, or maybe there was something else happening that we didn't understand that led him. He had something else on his mind. We come up with justifications. And that, says the Midrash, is loving righteousness and hating wickedness. Right? Hating to call someone else wicked. And that's why Abraham got promoted, which by extension is trying to say that's what makes the people of the covenant of Abraham promoted. That's what makes us better. That's what means to live up to his covenant, is to live according to that value.
And this ties right back to Aaron, because with the whole story of the golden calf, the Torah tells us that there were about 3,000 people out of 3 million or so that were involved, and our Chazal often says that it was the Ur of Rav, not the Jews. Let's not blame ourselves.
Right.
But Aaron made the point of saying to Moses, I tried to stall them.
Well, we're gonna get to that in more detail. So you're going exactly down the right line. But before we get to that, but notice what you're doing.
Yeah.
You are trying to find justifications
right.
for Aaron.
Right.
We're trying to say, well, this golden calf thing, maybe it wasn't what we thought it was. We are already taking a step to understand Aaron in a more favorable light than perhaps we would have been inclined to do, thanks to having had this lovely introduction in the Midrash by Abraham arguing on behalf of the Sodomites. So we have to read the rest of these Midrashim as being the rabbis arguing on behalf of Aaron, on looking for the most positive way to analyze what he did, and then ultimately his election, and then we'll see that it takes it to a next level. All right, so the Midrash continues. This is all from Midrash Rabbah, by the way, from Bereshit Rabbah. It's one whole chunk. A few things I had to edit out for space, but mostly intact.
Rev Berechiah, in the name of Rav Abba Bar Kahana, expounded the verse as referring to Aaron.
Remember, that's the verse, you have loved righteousness and hated wickedness verse. And you were anointed, which the anointing we can see already in our own chapter.
When the Israelites were about to commit that act, they went first to her and said to him, "Arise, make us a god."
By the way, that act, golden calf.
Right.
As he did not obey them, they rose against him and slew him. This is as what is written. Also in thy assemblies is found the blood of the souls of the innocent poor, which refers to the blood of her. Did I not find them breaking in? I punished them for all these, for having said, "These be your gods, O Israel." Afterwards they went to Aaron and they said to him, "Up, make us a god." As soon as Aaron heard of Hur's death, he became frightened, as it is said, and Aaron was scared when he considered the slaughtering, meaning he was frightened when he saw the slaughtered man before him.
All right, pause and don't look ahead. If we say Aaron was scared, what would we think he was scared of? What?
Being killed.
Being killed, okay? The initial step here would be to say, look, Aaron was scared. They already killed one guy, and they're asking him to do that. Guess what happens if he doesn't do it? He's dead. But if we said that, we wouldn't be following that first example of the Midrash. We wouldn't be judging him in the most favorable way. We'd be saying, okay, he was scared for himself. But you know what? Better that you should allow yourself to die than engage in idolatry. Right? And certainly that's what our tradition teaches in many other places. That idolatry is one of the things, especially public forms like this, and especially leading others to commit the act of idolatry, that it's better to sacrifice yourself than commit. So if we were to leave it here with him being afraid for his own life, that's not much of a qualification for becoming the high priest. But look what they do next.
Aaron said, "What shall I do? They have already killed her, who is a prophet. If they kill also me, whom am a priest, there will instantly be fulfilled against them the verse saying, should priest and prophet be slain in the sanctuary of the Lord, Israel will immediately be liable to exile."
So it's like, look, Herb is a prophet, I'm a priest. The book of Lamentation says that the people killed priest and prophet within the sanctuary of God. So if they kill me, they've now done what's a two-part trifecta, right? They've now hit the two elements they need to be put into exile. We'll never get to Israel if I let them kill me. If I indulge my own spiritual desire to be martyred rather than transgress this, I will be dooming my people to exile. So even though I don't want to do the idolatry and would rather die, says Aaron, I can't die because if I do, they're doomed.
Maybe I've got my chronology screwed up. Was he a priest at this time? He hadn't been consecrated.
Yeah.
Detail.
So, well, it is a detail, and it's an important detail. There's a long-standing debate within the commentaries about Mukdam and Meuchar, before and after in the Torah, and in particular when it comes to the Mishkan and Aaron's appointment as priest. So there are those who say this whole section of chapter 8 in Tzav was taking place with the erection of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. And there are those who say that even though it looks otherwise, that the Mishkan might have been built before the golden calf was built, or maybe the Mishkan was already instructed and all these details were given before the golden calf was built, in which case Aaron may not have been inaugurated, but he was certainly appointed as being the priest.
You know, it's almost the same kind of thing. When you're a king, you are a king. When you have your coronation, it's just ritual, but you were a king before.
Well, certainly that seems to be the way he's reading it. Yeah.
Aaron was set up as a priest.
Correct.
Because he was his brother's right-hand man.
Well, remember, we don't want to just give it to nepotism and say that Aaron was selected just because he was
But
Moses'
it
brother.
works.
I know it looks that way, but we are going to be trying to see how our sages have attempted to understand Aaron's selection by Aaron's own merits, not just by who his brother was. So this first step is by him saying he was willing to sacrifice his own non-transgression in order to prevent the exile of his people. Right? Even though he did not want to take on the sin himself of having created this idol, if he didn't and they murdered him, they would be the ones who would suffer the ultimate price. And he was willing to commit the sin rather than have them suffer.
Right. But they already killed Kirk.
Yes?
But he wasn't a priest. He was a prophet.
He was a prophet.
So it's okay.
So they've only done half of the verse.
Okay.
But if they kill him, that's 100% of the verse, and bada bing, bada boom, you're in exile. Okay. Another interpretation.
And Aaron saw this and built an altar before it. What did he see? He saw if they build it, one will bring a pebble, another a stone, and as a result, their work will be completed at once. But if I build it myself, I shall dally over the work. And our master Moses will come down and destroy the objects that I worship.
All right. So if they say, we're going to build an altar, it'd be done in 5 minutes. I mean, there's thousands of them. If each one brings a rock, it's done. But if I have to build it, I can pick up a rock, move over and put down the rock. It's as I was mentioning before we began, we've been showing some of the kids the Carol Burnett show clips from way back in the 70s that are on YouTube now. And a lot of them, I don't know if you remember, Tim Conway used to play the oldest man bit, and he would just
Yeah.
So that's what Aaron's doing, right? He's doing the oldest man bit. He's gonna take time to move all the pieces in place, and he's hoping, come on, Moses, come down the mountain. I don't want to finish this. And he's drawing it out. So he is doing it so they don't do it, because him doing it will be slower. Practical reason?
I like it.
You like it? It makes sense. He's not doing something because he thinks it's right or because he's afraid for himself. He's doing something because when he's doing it, he can control it and hopefully subvert it in the process, which he does additionally.
Moreover, as I am building it, I shall build it to the name of the Holy One. Blessed be he. This is indicated by what is written. And Aaron made proclamation and said, tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord. It is written, not a feast to the golden calf, but a feast to the Lord.
Right? So they're saying, build us this golden calf thing, or build us an idol so we can worship it. And he builds it. And while he's building it, he says, and we'll have a feast to God. So rather than saying we're going to have a feast to the idol, he kind of, does a little subversion of their plot and still includes God as being the target of the celebration. It's obviously not the way God wanted it to be celebrated, but he is adjusting the mob, trying to steer them back in the right direction, which if he were standing out in his purity and being killed, he wouldn't have been able to do. And they just would have run wild, built it in a day, immediately sacrificed to it, and had forgotten about God altogether, which meant that by the time Moses came down, everyone would have been wiped out. Right? So he is making a material difference in the outcome here for the positive. If you accept that the outcome is inevitable, that they were going to be doing this, he is doing a pretty good job of keeping it from being as bad as it could be. Make sense? Aaron rising a little bit in our estimation? Maybe? All right. Malka can reserve her judgment till later.
Okay.
Because we got a couple more things to say about Aaron.
Another interpretation. What did he see? He saw if they build it, the sin will attach to them. Better that the sin should attach to me and not to Israel.
All right, now that is an incredibly powerful statement. That Aaron was willing, let me be damned, rather than the nation. Because if they build it, they're done. But if I build it, it's just me. And it's throwing himself on the hand grenade of idolatry. Right? He would rather he suffered for this transgression than the entire nation.
And that brings to mind to me is when Moses has the argument with God, somewhat similar to the Abraham Sodom discussion, where Moses says, let me be blotted out of the book, and
Right.
I'll take the sins of the people upon me. And God said, no, each person dies for his own sin.
Correct. But here, Aaron would have the option of being the only one doing it.
Yeah.
So he would be the only one doing the sin.
Doing the sin, yeah.
Whereas if they all brought a rock, they all would be contributing to the sin, and they would be all guilty. So it is a very high standard of, imagine what it's like to be a priest. Imagine what it's like to stand there day after day. And yes, you get to do the happy celebrations, and you get to do the daily rituals. But a lot of your work are people coming up with an animal and putting their hands on the animal's head and confessing what they have done and saying over and over again all that they have done. And then you have to bear that to the altar of God and sacrifice it and make expiation, make atonement on their behalf. That's a pretty grueling process. And I imagine emotionally and spiritually must have been very, very taxing. So the idea that Aaron would be basically saying, if I can avoid them sinning, even if it means myself, is quite a testimony to the character that he had and would need to have, and his children would need to have if they were going to be Kohanim. That they were going to have to come face to face and work to overcome the transgressions of the nation every single day. That's a rough job. Onward.
Rav Abba Bar Yudin said in the name of Rabbah, this may be compared to the case of a king's son who became very overbearing and took a sword to cut his father. The son's tutor said to him, do not trouble yourself. Leave it to me, and I shall cut them.
It's okay, Prince. I'll go cut him. You just stay here. Now, the guy's not actually going to go cut him. That's the whole point. He doesn't want to go cut him. But he doesn't want the son to be in trouble. So
the king glanced at the tutor and said to him, I know what your intention was. Better that the sin should attach to you rather than to my son. As you live, you shall not leave my palace.
As you live is like an oath, like by your life, I swear.
And that which remains over from my table you shall eat. So too with Aaron. He shall not go out of the sanctuary. That which is left of the meal offering shall be Aaron's and his sons.
Right? So the idea that why were Aaron and his sons rewarded? Because they were willing to do this for the nation. They were willing to lay themselves on the line to protect, to help the rest of Israel. And again, we're seeing that they're pulling this out of the moment when we would have thought that Aaron had failed his duty to the nation most. Right? The whole golden calf incident. I mean, that would be when Aaron was at his worst, at his biggest mistake, his weakness. And the rabbis are saying, no, you have to look at the other way. Hate calling someone wicked, that was Aaron at his best. When he stood up for the nation, when he was willing to do what was wrong to prevent them from doing what was wrong, to slow down the process, to do everything he can to monkey wrench it. That was when he was at his greatest, not at his worst. And that's why he deserves to be the priest. A little bit more.
The Holy One, blessed be he, said to Aaron, thou hast loved righteousness and hated wickedness. You have loved to keep my children guiltless and have hated letting them be condemned as guilty. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness above your fellows.
All right, so take that, see how they're taking that sentence again of loving righteousness and hating wickedness. You love to keep my children righteous by taking away and preventing them from coming to blame. And you hate letting them be condemned as wicked. You would rather yourself be condemned as wicked than them. And that's how that verse then gets applied of loving righteousness and hating wickedness. And therefore the second half of the verse, to be anointed then, is the only appropriate response.
He said to him, by your life, out of the whole of the tribe of Levi, none is chosen for the high priesthood but you. Thus, take Aaron and his sons with him.
Which is our reverse from chapter 8. So what do we think? Interesting way of looking at it?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes? Hopefully you also see there's an important lesson here that the rabbis are trying to teach more than just the history of Aaron himself, which is how do we look at another person and how do we prevent ourselves from overjudging each other, or even overjudging ourselves for that matter. When we say love righteousness and hate wickedness, does that mean we have to be the table pounding critic of everything around us? Or does it mean we have to fight to squash all of the unfair condemnations, or even possibly fair condemnations, but to prevent it from being as bad as it could be?
Then how did the rabbis dovetail that with the fact that when Moses comes down, they kill the 3,000 people by the sword, and then there's a huge plague which kills a lot of the rest of them?
Well, because there were some bad people, right? I mean, that's how they balance it out, is that Aaron was doing everything he could to mitigate this mob action and doing everything he could to prevent as many people as possible from becoming indelibly stained with this transgression of idolatry. But there's a limit to what he could do. And that meant that there were still some people who absolutely were now heart and soul in idolatrous mode. And at this stage in our history, Moses had to respond with lethal force to prevent that from continuing to destroy this infant nation. But that idea that Aaron was willing to go above and beyond to see the best in each other, to try and mitigate the blame, becomes then in the rabbinic idea of what Aaron represented as a Kohen Gadol, which is Rodef Shalom. Now, a Rodef generally is somebody that is pursuing another person. So for example, if I was chasing Michael with a knife, I would be called a Rodef. And under Jewish law, by the way, you'd be allowed to kill me because I am threatening him with lethal harm. If the only thing you can do to stop me is to kill me, you would kill me. And that's called the law of the Rodef. It's a very interesting section of Jewish law. But here, he is not rodefing. He is not chasing someone to harm them. He is chasing shalom. He is a pursuer of peace. And if you look at the quote from Pirkei Avot, Marian, that first line in near the bottom, be one.
Be one of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace.
Right. That's a general admonition from Pirkei Avot, the teachings of our ancestors, that if you want to know a good path to live in life, love peace and pursue peace, just like Aaron did. And now we're going to see a couple of examples from rabbinic tradition.
There were thousands in Israel who were called by the name of Aaron, for if not for Aaron, they would not have come into the world. Aaron made peace between spouses, so they came together and named the child after him.
Right, husband and wife arguing, no babies. Aaron comes in, helps bring peace between the two. They make up and they make babies. And they say, what should we name this child? How about Aaron? Because if it weren't for Aaron, we wouldn't have patched things up.
So there were pastoral components to his job as
Exactly right. And the rabbis recognize that as being more important than the sacrificial role that he played. You know, they're not saying that the sacrifices weren't important. Of course, the rabbis did. Whole sections of the Mishnah and the Talmud are devoted to them, and we still hold up that ideal of closeness to God as being an important spiritual guidepost. But when we talk about Aaron, the guy, the thing that is emphasized most about him is not his piety, not his sanctity, but his pursuit of peace, his willingness to try and reconcile people one to another. And that's one example they give, which is the pastoral work between husband and wife to bring them together. And then there's this other example they give.
When two people fought, Aaron would go and sit with one and say, my son, look at what a state your friend is in. His heart is breaking. He is tearing his clothing and saying, woe is me. How can I lift up my eyes and look at my friend? I am ashamed before him, for I was wrong. And so Aaron would sit with him until he removed resentment from him. Then Aaron would go and sit with the other and do the same. When the two met the next time, they would embrace and kiss one another.
Right? He'd make peace among friends, among fellows, and do it again. The words matter. He doesn't go to the person and say, you know what, you're being a stubborn mule. You should forgive that guy and just, how does he elicit the forgiveness?
He listens, he commiserates.
He commiserates, and he gets each of them to recognize the sadness in the other one at what has happened to the friendship. Right? It's not trying to get each side to admit they were wrong. It's not even necessarily starting off by getting each side to apologize. It's by getting each one to recognize the other person is miserable because of what's happened. It's helping them have sympathy for the pain the other person is going through, even if it was caused, from my point of view, by that guy. I should still be upset by how sorry he feels and how unhappy he is, rather than saying, good, the jerk deserves it. I should say, you know what? Somebody who is that upset about having lost my friendship, that's someone I need to find a way to fix things up with, and vice versa.
Another interesting thing is that Aaron was the older brother, right?
Yes.
And yet he was subservient to his younger brother.
He had to follow the directions, yes.
Yeah. And
Subservience is kind of a state of mind.
His character too, though, that he was willing to be the servant of his brother and of God.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this notion that for Aaron, it was all about creating peace. And sometimes that meant not confronting. He doesn't go, like I said, and tell the husband, you're a blockhead, or tell the wife, you're being unreasonable. He gets them to reconcile peacefully. He doesn't tell the friends, why are you being so stubborn? Why are you being so stupid? He gets them to have sympathy and compassion upon each other. It's seeking peace rather than confrontation. Moses is much more of the confrontation guy. Right? Moses is much more smack the rock, part the sea, bring the plagues, open the earth. Right? He is a guy who is a man of action, a man of conflict. And absolutely that was needed in almost all the instances where that happened. He got in trouble for one in particular. But Aaron seems to be the opposite. He will seek reconciliation and compromise and bringing people together. He will seek peace. Mm-hmm. And the tabernacle, the Mishkan, and the sacrifices were there to establish peace within the community and between the individual and God. It was all about reconciliation. It wasn't about confrontation. And that really, of this list, makes him the standout guy for being the person to do that on the ongoing basis.
We can ask forgiveness of from another
mm-hmm.
person without saying that what I did was stupid, or what, without admitting,
mm-hmm.
and not even believing that I was at fault.
Mm-hmm.
But if I want that friendship and that relationship, sometimes you have to do that.
Being right isn't always worth killing the friendship.
Yeah.
And or the relationship between spouses.
Right.
And that's a very important lesson that it's hard sometimes to hold on to. But one of the reminders we have of that is by one of the few duties that the descendants of the Kohanim still have. The most regular and predictable duty the Kohanim still have is
the blessing.
Birkat Kohanim, the blessing of the nation, right, which they still do on the major holidays. And if you've never stuck it out till the end of Musaf on Rosh Hashanah and the high holidays to be there for this, you're missing something. Yeah. But they still are trying to bless the people with peace. Mm-hmm. Right? It's the final blessing that they extend to the nation is peace. They are still attempting to be the peace bringers, the reconcilers for our nation. And that's a beautiful legacy that they have inherited, and one that we continue to benefit from. Any other questions, comments? A little shorter today than usual, but that just gives us more time to go prepare for Purim. All right, take care.
This is great.
Interesting.